think about a moment when you experienced awe. Think about that concept, awe. It takes your breath away. It surrounds you in a moment. And this quote from Dacher Queltner defines awe is that you're most likely to feel it when you're moved by moral beauty. And moral beauty is the act of a human doing something extraordinary for another human. Mine was a little bit different. So meet Purdy Girl. In January of 19, we adopted her. She'd not been treated well. She was 11 months old. And 4 months later, just about everybody in my house had a scar. Something was wrong. We loved her, and we didn't want to give her up. I tracked down her breeder, who was somewhere in Montana, who had been breeding this same line, and Wayne and I didn't rehearse the bloodhound thing, by the way, had been breeding this same line of bloodhounds for 40 years. And she'd never heard a story about one of them being vicious. The first question she asked me was, "What the F are you doing with my dog?" And I explained to her. And she said, "You have no idea what you have." And we talked through it. She gave me some advice. And we agreed we were going to love it out of her. She seemed a little bit nervous, and she rushed off the phone with one question. "Is anybody in your house sick?" I said, "Sick how?" And she said, "Sick cancer." I said, "No." And she said, "Get checked," and hung up. In June, I was diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma. Now, as far as cancer goes, I got the easy ticket, right? I got out of it pretty quickly and pretty easily, and after 6 years, I have a clean bill of health. But, kind of what washed over me in that moment was, the power of this moment, the power of telling my primary care physician what I had heard and her saying, "We're going to do something about it. We're going to check. We're going to make sure." And so we did. And, what hit me was how arrogant I had been. I had worked in patient experience. I had worked in HCP experience my whole life, and I thought I knew everything. I thought I was right. I thought I was intuitive. And what I didn't understand was it was blocked. It was blocked by ego. It was blocked by what blocks a lot of brands, is thinking that our own needs need to be taken care of first. And they don't. And dogs don't have those issues. And that's when experience as a medicine became what I do and what I think about and what I care about, because the experience is not a metric. It literally has clinical implications. So I started to ask a lot of questions about what if? What if we thought differently? What if we did things differently? What if we framed things differently than we do? Because as manufacturers, you think about what you make. You make a product that changes the course of disease and damage, of injury and illness in living things. If that's not a miracle, it is at the very least magical. And so these companies, what if we reframe to think about what we do without worrying about regulatory? As we're miracle factories. We literally are giving products, creating products for people that change the course of disease. And what if we sought to uncover the fact that the experiences that surround this miracle should be as miraculous as the product itself? What if we sought to uncover the clinical value of making things easier for people? And now I'm looking at this audience, and you're marketers and you're data people, and you're extremely smart, and you're thinking to yourself, prove it. So allow me to prove it. This is work by Dr. Alia Crum out of Stanford University on something called the treatment effect. And what she studied was, if the physician is kind, if the physician is thoughtful, if the physician is confident, if the physician expresses compassion for the patient, and I don't mean just empathy. Empathy is feeling. Compassion is its more athletic cousin. It means doing something. If the physician does that, then that patient will do better. The biological mechanisms, the psychological mechanisms, the social determinants of health are a placebo effect that have medical implications. But we think and we talk about the drug effect. So this is kind of how I think about the experience. It's about being more. We enter any situation with an expectation. And that expectation, plus or minus the realities, that's your customer experience. That experience divided by actions that you take and multiplied by the impact of those actions, well, that's where you find a return on that experience. And that's what I'm seeking to do and what I help people with. So the difference here is shifting from simply being human to being humane. And it's not as simple as just buying a vow. It's a little bit more complex than that. So you have a new social contract with customers to simply be more useful by listening more deeply. If you get an email from me, this is in the footer of it. David Augsburger is an Anabaptist minister that being heard, and think about it for a moment, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, the two are indistinguishable. When somebody's not listening to you, when the brand isn't listening to you, when your doctor's not listening to you, it's not working. You're not trustful of them at all. But when they are, magical things can happen. Let's talk about the HCP. What happens when science is on everybody's side? Because oftentimes it is. Look at the glucagon-like proteins. Science is kind of on everybody's side. What's your differentiator? This work from DT Consulting I find fascinating. So 50% are the product features. Are you safe and efficacious? You kind of needed those things to be approved by whatever governing body in whatever country you're in, right? You have to be safe and efficacious. The product features make up 50%. You earned your way into the room. That's great. But then 35%. 35% is the actual customer experience, the experiences that they're having that are surrounding your brand. And we don't spend a lot of time on that 35%, do we? And now the 15% is arguably a culmination of the two of them. Are you creating great medicines? Are you creating great supply? Are you creating great experiences? Do I trust you as a company? Are you creating things that are useful to me? Are you making it easier for my patients to get, start, and stay on your medication? Are you decreasing my practice burden? But then we look at how we spend money, and if I took $100 and I broke it up, this is pretty much what it looks like. Sales reps, speaker programs, the medical, the non-personal, the omni-channel, the social, the ad boards, the medical education. These are our battle funds. This is what we're going to market with. And we're forgetting about the opportunity for the 35%. I don't think we're thinking as clearly as we might of the golden thread that could run through this, that is the experiences that we're creating when our rep walks through the door, when a physician shows up on our website, when they attend an event and we understand, was that meaningful to you? Are we showing up in the best possible way as we can for you? But the experience isn't just a battleground. You will compete on experience. You already are, make no mistake about it. You are competing on that 35% already. But it's also a common ground. Like Kaiser can't be good at it and Pfizer suck. Everybody has to be good at this. And then we've got this pea soup of patients, providers, and payers, and pharmacy, and physicians, and whatever the heck PBMs do, and pharma. And if one of you breaks down in the daisy chain, who gets hurt? The patient and the provider get hurt. But who else gets hurt? Wayne talked about it a moment ago. Your bottom line gets hurt. You're acquiring and you're reacquiring, and if you work in biologics, you might not be able to reacquire that person because the drug won't work on them again if they wash out. So the common ground is we as an industry all have to get better at this. I looked at just a handful of websites, and if one of these are yours and you take offense, I'm sorry. And I looked at how is it organized from left to right. And most of them begin with the 50%, with the safety and with the efficacy. And Ozempic runs up and down, which kind of messed me up, but we figured it out. Mounjaro is doing something interesting. They began with the experience of getting patients started. That's an interesting one. They're one of the first brands I've ever seen that had the employer as a tab on their brand because of coverage issues. I thought that was incredibly smart. Now, most of you are brand people, or you represent a brand and you represent a technology. My next what if is what if we rethought the notion of brand? Because we think that people know our brand. We think that they understand who we are. But the simple fact of the matter is no one has a Pfizer tattoo. Actually, no one has a good Pfizer tattoo. And I'm not picking on Pfizer here, by the way, Wayne. I'm not, because this is something very nice about Pfizer. I want you to read this. You don't have to read it out loud, but if Pfizer wanted a seat at the table, and it need not be Pfizer, it could be any one of your companies. If Pfizer wanted a seat at the table where important healthcare decisions were being hammered out, we had to earn it by acting differently, by partnering differently, and communicating differently. And it need not be Hank McKinnell. It could be any one of your CEOs. It could be any one of your C-suite. This is on page 13 of this book, A Call to Action, Taking Back Healthcare for Future Generations. Here's the rub. It was written in 2005. Now, 25 years later, the reality is, are we communicating differently? Are we partnering differently? Are we thinking differently? Because the thing that worries me is, are we going to be revisiting this in 2050? Because right now, it aged like milk. Why? Why does this happen? Because what we do works. I think Wegovy spent like $251 million. Last month, Abby, I know you're here, you probably spent $47 million between Rinvoq and Skyrizi on TV. And Sean talked about the challenges with TV earlier. It works. The army of reps work. The digital works. The DTC works. I'm not saying to stop doing it, but to Wayne earlier, rethink how we're doing it. Rethink about what the experience means, and does the experience carry clinical weight? For it, the fact that we put wheels on a suitcase, we put a man on the moon before we put wheels on a suitcase, is pretty crazy. And we're putting a lot of people on the moon. We're creating a lot of really interesting medications, but we're forgetting about putting the wheels on the suitcase. And it's systemic. The experience breakdown, not thinking about the experience, it isn't a moment, it's an entire system. So that common ground in the space between diagnosis and delivery, from the bench to the body, because I believe this starts in clinical trials. The clinical trial experience. What percentage of clinical trials fail to meet their endpoint? The vast majority. And for every day a clinical trial misses its deadlines, it costs $1 million in lost revenue. That experience begins then. And why, when we come out of phase 3, are we starting to design a patient service platform when everything we needed to know we learned in the trials of how people were experiencing it and where it was breaking down and what they needed and where they felt heard and where they didn't feel heard? So this is from 2012 from Leonard Kish. And if you think about it, I added the HCP part. I took some liberties with it. But if this experience was a drug, it would be a blockbuster. And it would be malpractice not to use it. I mean, my experience that I had personally with my primary care physician, whose name is on the door, and I see her every single time, and I love her, there was an experience to that. There was an experience in her care. There was an experience in her warmth. There's her experience in her confidence and wanting me to be better and to listen. So here's a path, because this isn't just nice to have. I think it's a must-have. And it involves your mindsets, how you think differently. It involves skill sets, which you will need, new skill sets that are probably within your organization. You have to build them. You have to build up the people. You have to build up the thinking. And then we'll talk about tool sets briefly. So how do we market better? To how do we reduce effort, improve outcomes, and build trust? One of the first things that I do with the brands that I work with, I worked with a big pharma about 4 years ago. They brought me over to their headquarters in Switzerland. I met with their senior executives. And as we were sitting there, C-suite people don't like doing this, but I said, let's do some work. Let's imagine that customer experience, patient experience, is in your annual report. It's not going to get in your annual report unless it has material impact, unless it has material value. Let's imagine it's in there. Let's write it right now. So we wrote it. 8 of us sat in a room, and we wrote 2 sentences. And they fought over it, and they got very passionate over it, and we wrote it. And last year, it was actually in their annual report. You have to futurescape. You have to design for this, and you have to think about it. And you have to think much harder, and this is from Wayne's book, about the deciding factor among equals. What is the deciding factor when science is on everybody's side? And not a shameless plug here. If you haven't read the book, read it. Why is being visible a greater focus than being useful or helpful? That's that top of the funnel, and we did not rehearse this, I promise you. It's a shared frame of reference from which everything else in the company can derive purpose, meaning, and context. Chapter 4, this is correct. Right? And then rooted in reciprocity, inherent in human relationships. That's moral beauty. That's all right there. That's what this is. And you're competing with bad experiences. You can compete with the people down the road. I cannot tell you how often I will get a phone call. How does our net promoter score compare to our competitor? Oh, you're way better. Oh, good. No, actually, you're way worse. It doesn't matter. I don't care. What does it matter? Why are you competing with them? Compete with the bad experiences people are having with your company and with your brand. Because if you don't, you might as well get in a snail race, and you might be the fastest snail, but you're still going to be a snail. And you're not moving at the velocity that patients need. You are not moving at the speed of need. On skill sets, from chasing survey-based scores alone to managing to metrics that matter to customers and to business. Business cares about what? Customer acquisition cost, lifetime patient value, churn reduction. That's what your C-suite cares about. That's what your executives care about. Those are the things you're tasked with doing. Be more efficient, be more effective, less waste, more value. And what do consumers, what do patients, what do doctors care about? They care about ease. They care about value. They care about outcomes. They care about time. And they care about compassion. I want to know that you actually care. I want your marketing to have more gas, and gas means gives a shit, right? I want to know that you care. We talk about the flower all the time. The simple fact of the matter is, Mario never wanted the flower. He wanted to throw fireballs. He wanted peach, but he wanted to throw fireballs. So what are your customers' fireballs? What is it that patient wants? They want to not be sick. They want to not be sick with the most ease that you can give them, with the most compassion that you can give them. What does that doctor want? They don't want their back office burdened by prior authorization. Make the experience part of the medicine. Find ways to simplify. Tool sets. From more tech debt to more customer currency, technology is not a solution, it's a tool. Listen, observe, organize, interrogate, and act on customer data. And all that being said, I am completely fascinated and immersed in agentic AI, but let's not start with the technology. I have a good friend, his name's David Sable, and he's a world-renowned wood carver, and I stood on a bridge with him one day in Lancaster County, and he started out and he had this piece of wood in his hand, and he's chipping away at it. And about 45 minutes in the conversation, I looked down and there's like a swan in his hand. And I said, how'd you do that? He said, it's easy, you just take away everything that doesn't look like a swan. So start taking away the things that don't look like a swan. And when you think about technology, the tools you select should serve the needs of the customer and the company, your needs, your customer's needs. If the text starts with about us in the first slide that you see, end the meeting. They need to start with about you. They need to start with an understanding of your problems. It is the last decision you should be making. We don't need any more tech debt. We have plenty of technology. Let me give you a little bit of update. She got diagnosed with cancer in September of 2023. So took her to the canine oncologist, and they said, if you treat her, she might have 7 months, she might have a year. If you don't, she probably got 5. And at the second canine oncologist in Philly, I said, it's your dog, what do you do? And I said, it's not a matter of money. It's not about the money. Just tell me what you would do. And she said, what do you want her to have? I said, well, between a long life and a good life, if I have to pick one, I'm going to pick the good life. And she said, then pick the good life. I said, I'm not going to do anything. She said, I agree with you. So I did something. got her a puppy. And we got her a puppy, and she was at the front door watching me leave this morning when I left. And what does that tell me? That the experience, somebody caring, something to love, something to value, changes our relationship with disease. It changes our relationship with illness. Sometimes it is the absolute best medicine. So one final thing. I have an open invitation. I call it May Day, and the fact that if you flip the M around in May, that it spells all is not accidental. And May stands for minimally acceptable experiences. And I think we have to start as an industry with standards on what is a minimally acceptable experience for our customers and our colleagues to have with our products. Because if we don't establish a standard, if we don't establish a baseline, we cannot get to the maximally achievable experiences. So I'm going to roll this out in guess what month? May, all right? And if you're interested and you would like to join me and you would like to start to think about and infuse into your company and your thinking, into your mindset, skill sets, and tool sets, the notion of experiences of medicine, this is how you can find me.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Any questions from the folks from the audience before we hop on to our next session? Just kind of doing a quick scout.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, it was that well received. Thank you again, Rich. Wonderful.